So what can you do with UDDI? What are some of the standard APIs? You will certainly want to search, so the inquiry API. So find business entity, find and then you can drill down, get details of the business entity that you have found. We'll see that. Then there are publication and subscription API. The other three we don't. So somebody talked about, is this amenable to federation? So there are APIs which will make it amenable to federation, but nobody has created a federated discovery structure yet. Right? So inquiry API patterns exist, right? So browsing is a pattern. Find something is browsing, right? And you can describe several categories to browse by. You will see specific SOAP messages that are going to send a browse request, right? And then you can drill down. Once you browse, you get back a bunch of services. I want the details of each one of these services, or details of one specific service that I picked, the first one I'm going to contact, something like that, right? Then you, of course, you invoke it, but that has nothing to do with UDDI itself. So here are some of the API functions for inquiry. So you can find binding, you can find a business, related businesses, because there is a network that is created. Businesses can also describe relationships with other businesses that exist within there. So related businesses.
UDDI is also exposed as a web service?
Yes. UDDI is exposed as a web service. That's why I said initially it works on the basis of SOAP, XML and HTTP only.
So then how do different providers of this UDDI directory service, how do they differentiate their service?
Quality of service is one aspect of it. Cost could be another aspect of it. I provide it for free versus I'm going to charge you 10 rupees for every inquiry is one aspect of it. The registry itself is a service, but it's not as important as the other services that have been provided. It's critical in the path, but so you can think of Google as a registry today. It will find you things. Right? So if I put out a web service and if I advertise it well enough and other web pages are referring to my web service description, then if I Google it, I'll find it. It's very likely that I'm going to find it. So I can think of Google as it's not UDDI, but it's a registry. Right? So, okay. So, UDDI runs over SOAP. We've already said this. So let's not get into details. So here is an example message for getting the service detail. So I'm going to send a request. So this is a SOAP, there's no header that is associated with this particular SOAP message, there's only a body. So get service detail, and I'm going to have to give a specific key, right? So everything is identified by key. So there's a service key, there's a business key, etc., etc. So you give the particular key and it's going to get back information for you. So it's a very simple message. So this is a response that is coming back. There's another SOAP message, right? So this is the body of the SOAP message that's coming back. Service detail, the operator is X Methods, which is a company that is out there. So the service key, this is what I searched for. It also gives me the business which offers the service, which is one level up in the containment hierarchy, right? So business which offers the service. Then there's some name description. Remember the service description that we had, right? So it's a get details, get service details. So it's going to give me every piece of information related to that service. That was part of the model that we had earlier. All right. So the binding templates, etc., etc. So this happens to have another SOAP binding. Here is the specific access point for the service, and so on. So the T model instance details are this. Then what would I do? I would go get the details for this T model, which will include the WSDL URL, right? So now I have the access information. Using this key, I will go find the WSDL URL, then go get the WSDL and then access the service, right? In this case, there is no search involved. I had a specific key to begin with and I went after it. So it's like a white pages kind of a search, right? So similarly, you can. So here is a find binding search. Now I'm doing a find, I'm not doing a get detail in this. So this is a search example. So I can actually attach several find qualifiers. Remember I did that when I gave the description earlier. So I'm saying do the search, but use these find qualifiers ultimately, right? Find qualifiers important and in this category, right? So search for me everything that is categorized with key value 34.10 dot some wildcard. Percentage is a wildcard entry, right? Then what? If you find multiple things, you can do an approximate match when you're doing the search, and then you combine all the category bags. I'm not sure exactly what this means myself. I've not used this. But you can also have things like sort by ascending order, sort by descending order, those kind of find qualifiers, right? This can have approximate or exact match. So whenever you actually use a wildcard, it should be an approximate match in this case. So here is I'm trying to find some T model. Oh, so here's another example of a find qualifier, case insensitive match, which is approximate. And the T models that I'm searching for has in its name, remember the keyed reference has a name associated with it. It has a name which is Rosetta percentage. If it's anything to do with Rosetta.net, give me all the T models that come back. That's what I'm saying. Right? So it could be capital R, O, S, E, T, T, A, whatever, case insensitive match. That's what I'm asking for. Right? So here is an example of a combined search. Can you see the yellow part as well? Because I can't. Okay, so the combined search basically says find the business, okay, or here are the different find qualifiers, sort by name ascending, so UTS-10 is some kind of an encoding scheme that is given, then or all keys, find qualifier, I'm not sure what this means either, I'll have to find that out. Then find businesses that have bindings that reference this fixed T model or one of the Rosetta.net models. So this is the combined search. The yellow and the green parts of it are giving two different ways to search this. You know, anything that has this specific T model key, right, or something that is going to match this set that I'm giving you. Right. Something that is not appearing down here is the Rosetta percentage is appearing. So I'm going to either search by this, and this is case insensitive, or find this specific T model key form. So this is like an OR. Right? Right. So some of the search API examples, obviously we can come up with many more different ones. So here are the publication APIs. So this is used by the publisher to send information into a UDDI directory. Right. I think what happened is that when they came up with the UDDI specification, there was a history of other directory services, including EBXML, that was being done in parallel. So the UDDI model of this categories and T models and the way information is stored within UDDI is not exactly the same as how you would represent information in a WSDL file. The bindings that you would provide in a WSDL file, the messages, the operations, and so on. So here everything is a T model. There is no such notion as a T model in WSDL, and so on. So there has to be a mapping between WSDL and UDDI as well. So there was a tech note that was released by the UDDI committee about 4 or 5 years ago on how to take WSDL files and store that information within T models, right? UDDI equivalents. I'm not sure that is necessarily interesting because we can do it, but that way you can, instead of returning the WSDL URL back to the consuming client, you can return the WSDL itself. Right? In other words, the WSDL information can be broken up, stored within T model structures within UDDI, and a query can be done which will pull all this information together and return it back to you. And there can be some intermediary that will turn it back into a WSDL file as it is coming back to you. Right? It's possible to do that as well. But right now I think it's confusing enough as it is, so we should probably not go into how we are going to do this mapping. Is that okay with everybody? Because I doubt that you're going to actually be taking WSDLs, breaking it up and storing it as T models in UDDI. Nobody is doing it out there too. That's one of the reasons why. But this tech node is there, and there is a way of doing it. which basically says, how are you going to take a WSDL file and store it into UDDI. So here is a very quick overview of this. So there are different structures. So the service here becomes a business service within UDDI registries, right? So we will create a business service for the service here itself. Then the port will become a binding template, right? So the port description becomes a binding template here. And then the T model entity has to be named, and the namespace information is used for this, right? This is actually a very high level overview. There is a more detailed description of how you go from WSDL to UDDI. So the port type itself, you will create a T model for that, categorized by port type, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to skip this section in the interest of sanity for today, and because we still have a lot to cover, unfortunately. Right? And this is not that critical that we need to actually sit and go through the details of this. I think this is important. So what do you do? Right? Who are the different entities who are going to be involved in using these registries, and what is it that they do? And to some extent we covered this in our earlier discussion, so we'll quickly step through this. So if there is such an industry consortium organized by verticals, so let's say e-government is one such vertical, and we want to offer services in the e-governance structure, right? These people will create WSDL documents that contains only the abstract part of the WSDL. What are the messages, what are the operations, what are the port types. The port type will capture the service essentially for us, right? So they will create that, and then they will put it out there. They will create a T model that makes a URL reference to this WSDL that may be located at some standard location, right? So if it is e-government, then maybe there's some kind of a federal government site where you store these WSDLs that a web server will serve out for you, and you create a URL reference to this and then put that information into a UDDI directory. Right? So you can create a T model that corresponds to that particular service, and you register the T model with UDDI. Right? So this is done by the industry consortium, right? A group of companies who are in the same vertical space. So specific business entities will actually implement these services, right? So there can be 5 or 10 or any number of implementations of these services running at different places, right? So they will find a T model for a particular service to offer. Rather than creating a T model themselves, they will say, here's a standardized T model that exists for this service that I want to offer, right? Let me offer it. So for example, in the e-governance case, suppose you want different state governments to offer similar services. So I think a classic example would be motor vehicle licenses, right? So this is offered by every state government separately. It's not a central government kind of a function. Right. But if every state government defined its own URL, it would kind of become if its own WSDL, it would be somewhat messy. If I moved from state to state, it would be really difficult to find these services, So it would be good to create a standardized service that is used by all the state governments. Each one of them will run an implementation of this for renewal and things like that. That's happening. Excellent. See, it's already happened. So this is what we want to do with all the verticals as well, banking and stock trades and demat accounts and things like that. Okay, so they determine a port address, they create a binding template, and then the binding template actually references the T model for which they are implementing, right? So they're implementing a service, and then they create a business service, and the business entity, if they want to advertise their business as well as opposed to just the service, they can advertise their business and then the business services that they offer, right? So that would be the way that things would work. And of course, consumers would use the standard UDDI API in this case, right? So you can do it both ways, programmatically or through UDDI browsers, right? So we've already seen this before, so I don't need to go through this. You obtain WSDL information from the T model, port address, and the binding template. And then you generate a client proxy, and then you invoke it based on the port address that you have just gotten from the binding template. So this is a abbreviated history of this registry specification business that has been going on. UDDI was derived from something called the ECO framework that came earlier. EBXML existed in parallel, being defined by a whole different standardization entity called OSS, and the two of them still exist independently, right? Both of them claiming to be standards. Now, what this Java community did was they said, it's such a pain in the neck dealing with these two standards, so we are going to create yet another entity called JAXR that will be a uniform API to all of these registries. It's a Java API though, so JAXR, that's the thing that you have to remember. It's not a standard, it's a Java API that is a uniform API to these different registries, right? So you can do registry searches across a diverse set of registries using JAXR. That's the notion. I have a diagram somewhere here that shows how this works. So different registries like EBXML, UDDI and whatever can be there, and you can have a single API that different consumers can use. So either programs that are searching for things within this registry browsers, etc., can write to this JAXR API, right? We won't go into the details of the JAXR API here, but I think it's useful to know that for people who are doing Java-based programs. I think this is written in Java, so that's one thing. So JAXR itself is not a registry model, most certainly not. It simply takes a model that is the union of the models of all the registries that are out there and offers a search API on that union. That's all, right? And it's not the least common denominator either, so it's actually a union. That's the important thing. Because there are overlapping registry standards, we might want to use JAXR as the notion. Okay, so questions about this session?
So, is there any plugin for NetBeans?
For JAXR? JAXR is just a Java package, so you don't need a plugin. NetBeans doesn't work on the plugin model, unlike Eclipse. Okay, so anything that is available as a Java package, you can import into NetBeans and use, and JAXR is a Java package, right? So you can use that, so most certainly through NetBeans. It can also be used through Eclipse, so JAXR is just a Java package. It can be used with any IDE, because Eclipse has excellent support for Java too. Right. So, and for web service creation. That's a matter of personal opinion. So I would say they're equivalent. Eclipse probably has wider acceptance worldwide as a IDE, open IDE, open source IDE, because many people have written plugins to this. NetBeans is also open source, by the way. You can get the source for NetBeans and add to that if you want to. But Eclipse is probably more widely used.
Are there any UDDI registries in India?
Not that I know of, but maybe one of you know of it. NIC should run one, right? Absolutely. You should be the first ones to run such a directory. Who else would take this on?
But how much is the quantity of web services provided in India?
Maybe not as much, but we will eventually get there. One way of spurring web service development may be to put a directory out with some services and let's start people consuming it and so on. So that's, the chicken come before or the egg come before is the question. I don't know. Okay.
UDDI directories are in existence for a long time.
Oh yeah.
But,
why is because of some of these translation problems. So there are simpler ways of doing this. You saw how confusing T models and categories were, right? So maybe I could simply, by comparison, something like JNDI or Corba naming is very, very simple to understand. Very simple, right? I just have a name which is a hierarchy in JNDI or in Corba naming, and when I search by the name, it returns something. It typically returns an object reference in the case of Corba and in case of JNDI, right? But it could be made to return a visual URL, just as simply. So if that's all I want, but I don't have business information, so I have to store that somewhere else. This is a very comprehensive model. as a result of which there is some complexity that will obviously come to play if it is comprehensive, right? So there are, don't get me wrong, there are registries, there UDDI deployments do exist, but they are not public yet. There are many intranet UDDI deployments worldwide, they exist. They are just not public registries. People are not yet willing to run the risk of sticking a registry out there so that people find services that they're going to start hitting randomly. So there are many issues that have to be solved there. How do I bill for the use of a service online? Right? If I do one online stock quote, how do I bill for the use of that service hit that I'm going to take? So there are some issues that it's not technologically impossible to solve these issues. We have the technology today, but there may be policy issues, all kinds of other. Right? Okay, so we'll.
Client stuff will be generated dynamically in metrics because say we'll be searching it in UDDI, we'll be getting that WSDL. And then from WSDL we'll be parsing it using that XML parser down or anything else. We'll be extracting out all the components, like parameters and their types.
Right.
So how that?
No, that's not the way it works. So the way it works is one of two ways, like you saw yesterday. The one way is that you will explicitly during programming time you will create a client reference to a WSDL file whose location is a URL that you feed it. Now that URL can be gotten from a UDDI registry. Right? Actually NetBeans also has an API, by the way. What you see is a GUI in front of you. NetBeans also has an API, and you can call NetBeans API from Java programs just as easily, right? In which case you can do all this programmatically. But otherwise that's how you do it. This is static. It is compiled in with the rest of the code when the stub is created. The other way of doing this would be the dispatch method that we saw, in which case you are not constructing the request dynamically. You actually know what the WSDL looks like a priori, and you would have constructed a SOAP message for that WSDL, abstract part of the WSDL, and you only get the binding information and then you invoke it.
So not only that, we need to know number of parameters, their type.
No, that's what that I'm saying is statically done. That's not dynamically done. Can you do it? You can do it. You can use Java Reflection API to do it. It's not hard. But whether that would be a useful scenario, I don't even know how to access this service, and I'm going to access it. Do you have the parameters in place? That's the first question. Right? You may not have provided the data where the parameters exist, which is required by a service that you have never seen before. Right? So that is where the dynamic invocation problem comes in. Yes. And I may not have all the parameters in my program. That means I may have to prompt a user. That I can do very easily. So I can browse a WSDL description and pop up a web form to a user based on the WSDL description saying please enter the data for these parameters, and then invoke the service dynamically. That is very easily doable even today. Right? But that would mean human involvement of some kind. Okay, so we'll take a break now, we'll come back and we'll take a look at workflow.